My guest today is a woman who had the courage to disrupt her life completely, to walk away from her marriage, leave the city behind, and build a new life rooted in meaning, purpose, and freedom on 4 acres of quiet, peaceful land. 15 years later, she's once again standing at a crossroads, questioning what she truly wants and the legacy she'll leave behind. In this episode, we dive into what it really takes to live consciously, to rewrite your story with courage and build the life you actually want. Because sometimes walking away from the marriage, relationship, friendship, or 9 to 5 is the most soul aligned move you can make. Enjoy the episode. Hello, beautiful humans. Welcome back to another episode of the Skin I'm In podcast. I'm your host, Chanel, and this is the space where real stories meet radical self-discovery. Here, you'll find peace through clarity, purpose through inspiration, and the permission to be your authentic self through the stories of men and women who've walked the path before us. If this show moves you, hit that like button, share it with someone you care about, or subscribe so you never miss an episode. That small but powerful act helps the show grow and brings in the guest you most want to hear from. In return, my promise to you is that I'll keep showing up with the raw, the real, and the conversations that crack us wide open, reminding us we're not alone. So, let's dive in and find the light in the shadows together. Welcome to the Skin I'm In podcast, Sarah. It's so great to have you on the show.
Thank you ever so much for inviting me. It's great to be here.
This conversation, our first conversation has been sitting with me, and I've been talking to all the women I know about having you on the show because I think that there is so much to be inspired about in terms of what you've done and the courageous steps you've taken. So let's jump straight into that. 15 years ago, you made a massive life-altering decision to end your marriage and move to the middle of nowhere with horses in your backyard. You've got horses, chickens, all the things. I don't know if you've got any other animals, but that is a very big decision to make. What was the catalyst, Sarah?
Well, I guess ever since I was a child, I wanted horses in my backyard. It was just something I spent most of my childhood nagging my parents to buy acreage so I could have a pony at home. And that wasn't their dream, and it never happened. And then life took over. And I ended up in Australia. So I grew up in South Africa. I moved to London when I was 20. I did that on my own as well. Met my now ex-husband in London. He literally met him on the day that his visa had been approved to move to Australia. So we had a year together, and then I followed him out here. And things, didn't go as we planned. And when my marriage did sort of start to break down, I realized I had some choices to make. I could go back to England, or I could stay here and pursue my dream of having horses in my backyard. And that's what I did. And I guess a lot of the time we don't actually chase our dreams or follow our dreams until we are kind of like on the pointy end of a crisis. And at the time, my ex-husband and I had a fairly large house with a big mortgage, and living in suburbia, there were, rates which are quite high. And I was thinking, well, there's no ways I can afford this on my own unless I get a lodger. And I really didn't want to get a lodger. So I started looking, and, I found a cottage, and this cottage, and I literally decided before I even walked up the front driveway that I wanted to live there. I just knew. And it was scary. And people told me I was crazy. I remember my boss at the time telling me I was absolutely bonkers to be moving into the middle of nowhere, an hour and a half commute from the city, having never lived on acreage, before, having never done acreage on my own. But I just decided to do it. And yes, it was terrifying. It was absolutely terrifying. But you know what I told myself over and over again was, if it doesn't work out, if it doesn't work out, I can always go back to my old life. I mean, it would have looked different, but I could, if living on acreage didn't work out for me, I could go back to the city. And I still had the job, I mean, it was a huge commute, but, and I think we get so wrapped up in that sometimes that things are always permanent. And the reality is that whatever decision we make, we can't always reverse it in some way, shape, or form. But yeah, I mean, that was the catalyst for me, just, knowing that I had a choice and deciding that it was time to chase this dream that I'd had since a child. And I did. And it's the best decision I've ever made. I love my life here. I wouldn't change it for the world.
What do you think that chapter of your life taught you about your capacity to start over?
Well, it was 15 years ago. And I think I was a lot braver back then than I am now. I think well, certainly from my experience, as I get older, I'm finding that my risk capacity is lower. And I guess I've always been, I don't know what the right term is, but a bit of a free spirit. When I lived in the UK, I spent most of my life on a motorbike, riding around Europe with a group of women motorcyclists. And, I was membership secretary of that organization for many years. And, as I say, as a 20-year-old, I left South Africa on my own and moved to London on my own. And that was I had great big visions of traveling Europe on my own, and I didn't. I ended up loving London and living there. But yeah, so I think I was braver than I am now. Does that answer your question? I'm not sure if that really.
It does. I'm smiling because I'm like, there are so many similarities between us, and I think that when we are in that age bracket, I feel like the free-spirited ones just tend to go on adventures. I mean, I moved to Chicago at 21, never having left my family or been on a holiday. I lived there for a year and then I came back. And then at 27, I moved to Montreal for 5 years. I'd never been there either. And I figured, well, if Montreal doesn't work out, I can just move to Toronto. So much like what you were saying, when things don't work out, it is easy to just, but it's not actually easy for everyone. I thought this was easy for everyone, but it's not actually easy for everyone, which is why I was so interested in finding out your perspective, or maybe your hindsight insight as to who you may have been 15 years ago, as to, who you realized you were and what it took. Because from what I hear, this is not normal for people to do. And I'm like, well, if it's not normal for people to do, what do normal people do? So I find it really perplexing. So I love hearing this about, your own life and your own journey, because there's a lot that I resonate with.
I actually really agree with you, and I've always been independent. And I guess another thing that's happened in the time that I've been here, and I think because it is such a hot topic at the moment, and obviously with social media and things like that, is just digging into my own traumas, I guess, for lack of a better word, and learning. I became absolutely fascinated by developmental trauma, but also wondering why I have spent the vast majority of my life on my own, so single and extremely independent. Asking for help is probably one of the hardest things for me to do. And that led me down the rabbit hole of attachment styles and developmental trauma. And I have a layman's or a laywoman's understanding of trauma, that I do believe that my independence and my free spiritedness, if that is a word, is driven by trauma and developmental trauma and my attachment style. So I actually have a anxious avoidant attachment style, which I or disorganized, for people who are familiar with that. So I think that a lot of my choices have been driven by that and by my childhood. But you're absolutely right. And I've just assumed that everybody does this type of thing. But one of my neighbors, and she's beautiful, she's a local wildlife carer, recently lost her husband. She's in her 70s. They were married, as like teenagers just about. And she recently lost him. And not only is she dealing with the grief, but she is dealing and trying to learn how to do life on her own. And these really basic things that I just take for granted and just do, she has absolutely no idea of, and they terrify her. And I mean, I guess an example of that would be like whippersnipping, bush, and it's just something I do. Picking up a chainsaw is just something I do because I live on acreage and because I'm independent. And I learned how to do it because it's an essential part of living here. But she lives here, but she's always relied on her husband to do that. And it just blew my mind. It really, I couldn't actually, and I don't mean this is disrespectful at all, but you're absolutely right. We just assume that everybody can do this, and not everybody can. But I will say in the same breath that, I might be able to, swing a chainsaw around or a whippersnipper. Don't ask me to sew on a button. We all have our strengths. So
I love that.
I can almost guarantee if I do sew on a button, it'll be off again before the day's out.
Oh, gosh.
So we all have our strengths. And just because I can, chop up a tree, and I would certainly never drop a tree, but, I'm quite comfortable chopping up a tree that has fallen down, or I'm quite happy to get stuck into brush cutting. As I say, don't ask me to do things like that. And, I will defend nature and animals, but I won't necessarily defend people. So, we just all have our strengths, and we're all here for a different reason. And part of my rabbit hole around trauma was learning about the RAS, reticulated activation system, I think it is, and how we are wired to actually see things. So for me, I literally can't drive down a road without finding an injured animal, but the person behind me, wouldn't see that, whatever it is, a green tree frog. I'm very good at finding green tree frogs that have been hit by cars. I mean, a green tree frog on a road. I find them all the time, because my brain is wired for that. Whereas, a baby at a function that perhaps needs a nappy change, I wouldn't have a clue, and that's not because I don't have children. I'm just not wired that way because my RAS isn't wired that way. Well, that's my theory anyway.
I mean, I think that there's quite a bit in that, though, when you say that, because again, I'm like literally word for word what you just said. I will defend every animal, anything that comes under wildlife, whether it's flora or fauna. And while I am very loyal with family and friends, I keep a very small circle because my priority is to see where there's been an injustice when it comes to animals. So, and I come from a country, like I was raised in a war-torn country, so I know human injustice. But I don't automatically, and maybe because, I've been desensitized to that. I think that especially growing up in Australia, you kind of just, it's very sheltered here. And so we don't understand what it's like to be in war for the most part. Most people have not experienced war as Australians born, Australian raised. Whereas people who do come from other countries in which there is an influx of immigrants right now, there's always a war going on somewhere in the Middle East, that they don't realize what that actually looks like and how to live in that kind of lifestyle. And I think that maybe I've perhaps become desensitized to it because I'm like, there are bigger fish to fry right now in my day-to-day, there's nothing I can do about what's going on elsewhere, And I don't know whether that's right or wrong, but I don't necessarily look at things in terms of right or wrong. I just look at it as what's in my present moment and what can I control, So I love that, the tree frogs would be like handful size. How can you see a tree frog? I'm thinking, going, I totally get it if I saw an animal on the side of the road, but I would completely miss a tree frog for sure. That's hilarious. Let's talk about the life that you're living. So you live a slow, sustainable, conscious lifestyle. What does that look like on a day-to-day level? And like, what do you do in terms of managing your acreage? Because that I can't even imagine what that's like. I feel like you'd mow the lawn, but you'd have a lot of lawn to mow. So what does that look like on a day-to-day?
Okay, well, I first of all, as a thank you COVID, I now work from home 4 days a week. So I have a 9 to 5 job, and I work from home 4 days a week, and I go into the office 1 day a week. So that has given me a lot more time flexibility. Flexibility. And I probably spent the first year decompressing and actually getting out of survival mode because of the years of being of all the commuting. So I commuted for 3 hours a day for 10 years, and that was on top of getting up at the crack of dawn to go to the gym. So my day looks like, I still get up at the crack of dawn, partially because I love the crack of dawn. The first day that I moved here, the very first morning, which was my actual moving here was a disaster. But the very first morning that I woke up here, I remember I was lying on a mattress on the floor, and I just lay here listening to the birds. And I remember thinking how quiet it was, but it wasn't quiet. It was noisy because of the bird life. So the noise was totally different, and it was the noise of the country. And it was just like, oh God, it's just beautiful. It was so beautiful. And I will never, ever, ever forget that morning. So for me, waking up early is really important because I get that. I get taken back to that first morning and the dawn chorus of all these birds going. And I get up and I feed my horses and I go to the gym. So it's a bit of a drive to the gym. And then I will come back. And on the days that I don't go to the gym, I've got vegetable gardens. So I sort of potter around in there and I spend time with my animals. As far as looking after the place is concerned, I'm only on 4 acres. I have attempted to keep as much of this place as wild as possible because I love the wildlife. So I have resident wallabies here. There are 7 female wallabies who literally stay here permanently. And I have seen them raise their joeys from one generation to the next. They have names. I know who's grandmother. I know who's mum. I know who's daughter. And, there's Fleur, who's kind of like the oldest wallaby here. Her daughter is Squirt. Squirt's daughter is Peanut. After Peanut came Little Man. And Little Man is the wallaby from last season. Squirt's had another joey this season. But that joey is sort of very, very independent and is off. I do see that little joey. It's another little boy. But actually knowing these wallabies by sight and knowing who the mum is, who the daughter is, just seeing the generations has been incredible. And I'm so blessed and so grateful to have that kind of relationship because those wallabies trust me. And part of that is because I don't have dogs. I just have my chickens and my horses here. If dogs do get onto the property, I turn into that, I won't swear, crazy. And I literally turn into a banshee. And I will chase them off the property. So we've had dingoes hanging around. We've had people with domestic dogs who have got out and got onto the property and, chased the wallabies. And I do literally go into psycho. I would imagine the same kind of mode that a mother gets into protecting her children. And so I don't have to look. I don't look after the. I don't mow for hours. The horses take care of the grass. And the reality is that my block is a small block. It's quite steep, and because of the weather we've had, unfortunately, there has been so much erosion. I do have a bit of a weed problem at the moment, so I do look at it and go, "Oh my God, that's so overwhelming." And then I sort of, turn around. But there'll be days when perhaps I've had too much coffee, and I will actually get stuck into taking care of the weeds. But I've tried to keep this as low maintenance as possible, and my excuse, I guess, is that it's land for wildlife, although it's not land for wildlife. I haven't gone through the process of formally turning it into land for wildlife. But people who aren't on acreage won't understand how much people hate black wattles. Now, black wattles are, they can grow into very big trees. They get to 10 plus years and they generally start to die off. The ants love them, so ants pour into them, and they will drop stuff everywhere. They drop branches, leaves. So people generally don't let the black wattles grow, but the black wattles are pioneer species. They are actually, wildlife really rely on them. Yellow-tailed black cockatoos in particular. So my block is absolutely covered in black wattles, and if anybody who's kind of from the country turns up on my block, they're like horrified. Absolutely horrified by the amount of black wattles I have on my block, and I leave them deliberately to support wildlife. And the wildlife I have here is incredible. So, yeah, I don't really do a lot. I do have to keep the veggie patch mowed because snakes, and the horses can't get in there, so they can't graze they can't graze the grass. But yeah, I have a chainsaw, I have a whippersnipper, I have a ride-on mower, and push mowers. I have a bazillion different types of saws.
This life sounds so serene and peaceful. Like, it doesn't sound like there isn't hard work to do, but it sounds like work that really would give you the opportunity to reflect, to be grateful. I've got no idea what black wattle looks like. Is it anything like the yellow one?
Absolutely. Absolutely. But it turns into a really big tree. So,
okay. So are the flowers similarly yellow and fluffy, or they look different?
No, yellow and fluffy and full of bees. And
so are these the trees that you're having some issues with at the moment? The ones that you're defending, or?
No. Okay, so thank you so much.
Okay, so what are the trees? Yeah, let's get into that.
Okay, so I live on Mount Mee. I live off Mount Mee Road. So where I live is Ocean View in southeast Queensland, and it's Mount Mee Road is a tourist drive, and at the top of Mount Mee is a little village called Mount Mee Village. And just before you come into Mount Mee Village are two very, very large and very old gum trees. So eucalyptus, and these particular eucalyptus are actually, I can't remember the scientific name, but they're basically food trees for koalas and a whole load of other different animals. But I don't want to. I've been talking about it so much on my socials. So Transport and Main Roads basically want to do some work on the road. They've been upgrading the whole road. Well, they've been resurfacing the whole road, and there's a bend just before you come into Mount Mee Village, and on this bend there's an embankment, and the trees are on this embankment, and Transport and Main Roads want to basically flatten the embankment, and in order to do that the trees need to be removed. These trees are potentially hundreds of years old. They're huge, and Transport and Main Roads have basically said that it is the only option. They have not provided any of the assessments. So these are the pre-site assessments before the work, commence, to substantiate why this is the only option, to give people and to give the community confidence that they have actually looked into other options. So the works were supposed to happen 2 weeks ago. Well, yeah, 2 weeks ago. And my understanding is that people who live in that area in the direct vicinity received a flyer to basically warn them that the road would be closed because they'd be chopping down these trees. So there's been a huge public outcry and community outrage. And because of the amount of people who were emailing the local member and TMR, they delayed the project by a week. So on Monday, the trees were supposed to be removed. We turned up en masse to protect the trees and get in the way, but nobody turned up. So we're not actually sure when they're going to turn up because we still haven't had an exact date from them. But it's a bit of a moving feast because, as I say, the community only found out about it just before the trees were due to be removed. It was then delayed by a week, and then on Friday, there were contractors at the site taking soil samples. And those contractors were contractors of TMR. So now the question is, why weren't those soil samples done weeks or months before, and certainly before the work was scheduled to happen 2 weeks ago? TMR is starting to send out responses, and the response at the moment is that no work will happen on site until they receive the soil samples back, or the assessment, the reports. But they've also indicated that they are waiting for reports from licensed wildlife spotters who will do an assessment of the site. And that is something that should have happened weeks ago as well, because these trees, we have video footage of sugar gliders living in these trees. So the question now is, why weren't these reports done before the work was due to commence? So I think there's a bigger picture at play here, rather than, I mean, it's not just, they're not just trees, but I think there's a bigger picture at play around this. But yeah, so we've got people there 24/7. We've got a roster. We have another meeting on Saturday to ensure that there are going to be people around the clock next week, because quite frankly, we don't trust what TMR are telling us at the moment. And, you know, we're going to be doing this very peacefully, but if they turn up, we're going to be in the way. As simple as that.
I love everything about this. My voice is, my throat, I like want to yell because I'm like, I think, and I'd love your perspective on this because I feel like you would have one, but I think that what's really lacking, not necessarily in your community, because it sounds like your community is on top of it, but there really is this idea that trees are not living and therefore you can do whatever you want with them. And if they're in the way, well, we'll just take them down. But when you consider the amount of data that shows that if you put your hands on a tree and you stand barefoot at that tree, you literally tap into the life force of the earth and the tree. It is the most beautiful thing. We are lucky to have these trees with they would have seen the earth in ways that we would never have seen. And we take for granted what they actually give us and what their purpose is, and just how intricate their root systems are and how they support life on earth. It frustrates me so deeply. And that's why I think I love that you've got people who are actually protecting these trees 24/7, because the community gets it. Like, they get the importance of the existence of these trees. That is their home. Oh, just absolutely makes me livid. These businesses just have no concept outside of, is this profitable? Is this the easiest way for us? What's the most convenient? I wonder why they're not supplying the assessments.
Well, we know why they're not supplying the assessments. They haven't bloody done them. That's as simple as that.
Yeah, well,
you know, I'm saying it. Yeah. I'm just saying it out there, you know, because if they had, and I mean, what's so frustrating is that, you know, our local member, who also happens to be the Queensland Environment Minister, I hasten to add, has just told us that this information is accessible through the right to information process. So there are community members, you know, people in this community who have applied for this information. It's not free, but it's not And the reason I believe that it hasn't been provided is because it's never been done. And I don't know, this project has been classed as insignificant, and I don't know what that classification means, whether it means that it's insignificant from a financial perspective or if it's insignificant from an environmental perspective. TMR is saying that it's, it is about safety, and there was a motorcyclist killed at that site in 2023. And my heart goes out to that family. Nobody is disputing the safety aspect of it, but there are other alternatives. And I mean, you mentioned, money, and from a financial perspective, a kilometre up the road, it changes to 60 kilometres an hour. It's currently in an 80-kilometre zone, and up until a few years ago, it was actually a 100-kilometre zone, but they've never reduced the speed limit. So all they would actually need to do, and I mean, this is my thought, is move the 60 sign a kilometre. And it's right before a school as well. So, I mean, there's extra, there's extra weight to move the 60 kilometres sign. But I agree, and I get really emotional about this, and I'm really angry because it feels to me like the environment is the first call. And I just flatten it. And like you say, the more we learn about trees, they're not just things. I mean, they're growing, living, organisms, and they provide shelter and habitat and air. Let's not forget about air. I mean, all the data that's coming through about their relationship with each other and how they can send nutrients to sick trees, that are adjacent to them, their relationship with fungi. It's mind blowing. And I mean, the more we learn about it, it's incredible. They are incredible. And I mean, on Monday when we were there, 7 News turned up, and a gentleman who's lived on Mount Mee his whole life, he's 87 years old, called Brian, talked to the 7 News team. And he was very emotional. But Brian shared with us that he used to cycle past those trees as a boy. And they were huge then, which has made us all realize that these trees, especially the larger of the two, potentially a lot older than we first thought it was. And the community want those trees to stay. And I just think I agree totally with you that it's just so heartbreaking that these trees, any trees, are removed. And I understand there's invasive species and things like that. So, I mean, it's very, very complex. But whether it's a developer or a government department like TMR, I think removing trees should be the last resort when everything else has been exhausted. And we don't believe that that's happened in this case. And as I say, at the risk of stirring the pot even more, and I mean, this is something that I will be exploring, how many other insignificant projects have been completed without the correct assessments in place? So I think this is a much bigger picture than just these 2 trees.
It's just 2 trees. It's just 2 trees.
It's 2 trees that are on this bank. Well, I mean, look, it's in a group of trees. There are other native trees there, but the 2 trees, as I say, there's one that we suspect is probably over 200 years, this really big one, and then another one that's slightly smaller. So those are the 2 trees that we are, up in arms about. But I mean, there are other trees, and it's a group. It's just a little clump of trees. The whole area was extensively logged, so there's not a lot of these big, mature, grandfather trees, for lack of a better word, left. And yeah, we believe that there are alternatives.
There has to be. I mean, I've been through the jungles in Mexico and seen the roads that were built thousands of years ago around the wildlife, around the trees. There is the complex structure in which they, like the way they have built the roads even ensures that they never flood. This is thousands of years ago. Like, there has to be another way. Of course there's another way. There's no question there is another way. And to think that, and look, I have compassion obviously for anyone who's been hurt or lost their life when it comes to accidents, but it's also not the first time you've driven down that road, I would assume. And so, you know, those trees are there, you know, you should probably slow down. Like, the responsibility is on the human, not on the tree. So do you know what I mean?
Well, this is, I guess, one of the things that I was sitting with this week, and I was wondering why I get so worked up about, you know, these type of situations. And it's about being a voice for things, creatures, and things like trees. I don't want to call them things, but we'll call them things that don't have a voice. In this instance, this motorcyclist didn't hit the trees, you know, and the trees didn't jump out and cause the accident. Now, the cause of the accident was loss of control. I don't know if that was because of speeding or if he, you know, just was, I don't know anything about him. And I know that people have tried to find out more information around him and we've drawn a blank. But here's the reality. You know, I don't know if he hit the embankment that these trees are growing on, and that might be why they want to flatten this bank. But TMR has basically said that they want to remove this embankment and make recovery more possible. But I mean, shouldn't we be keeping people on the road, not preparing for when they come off the road because they've, you know, potentially overcooked it on a corner? And the other thing I will hasten to add is that the Mount Me Road is massively popular with motorcyclists. And yeah, this bend is really popular for going fast so you can get your knee down. Now, I don't know if that was, you know, a play in this gentleman's death, but the reality is, and this is something that somebody said on a community group. This guy on one of the Facebook community groups said his uncle was killed on a motorbike when he hit a lamppost. We don't go around chopping down every lamppost. And this particular lamppost was outside a hospital. So we definitely don't go around chopping down lampposts that supply power to hospitals. Now, that was a lamppost that somebody hit. Nobody has hit these trees, and they are like the lifeline to so many animals. So I agree with you. People need to take accountability and responsibility for their own actions, and the government needs to stop being big brother and taking responsibility for people's actions also. And
it often feels like we're being babied.
Absolutely. And I think, you know, I think Australia has a little bit of a reputation for that. You know, it's just
oh yes, they do.
Overreach. There's massive overreach. You know, is it really necessary?
No.
People need to take
but I think that it also comes down to really simple things like remembering our place in the ecosystem. We as humans are the most out of place species on this planet. The most out of place. People can say whatever they want. I have been saying to myself, I'm going to make like a tinfoil crown. I am all kinds of tinfoil when it comes to this. We are the most out of place species on this planet. We don't make sense. Everything else makes sense in the ecosystem. We do not make sense. And so our solution to things is to flatten stuff. Flatten, dig, take up, take minerals, take resources, take. Whereas the rest of the ecosystem is a give and take. They understand their place in the ecosystem. You know, and I think trees are one of the most wonderful examples of this. Their leaves are good for the soil. What happens to the soil is good for the tree. They literally take up nourishment from that soil that includes bugs, worms, droppings of animals, everything that feeds into that soil that then becomes nourishment and food for that tree. And then the tree gives us nourishment through clean air. Like, we don't do that for anything on this planet. Humans do nothing in terms of that ecosystem. Nothing. We contribute nothing. We take everything. And so I'm like, I love Earth, but I don't feel like we should be here.
You're talking, I mean, you're talking to the converted, and I absolutely agree with you. I do. And I'm sorry, but I actually feel like the human race is like a cancer on this planet. And
for the most part.
Yeah, for
not
the
everyone.
most part. But there are, and I mean, this is something that, as somebody who's very much like yourself, I have a really small circle of friends. I am very much a hermit. And I guess because of that trauma I was talking about before, I don't trust people. But seeing this community come together, even though, we're all so different, and coming together over these trees has been just beautiful, absolutely beautiful. So there are good people out there, and there are people who care about trees and the environment. And I think part of the problem is that we are so disconnected with nature. We are part of nature. People are always saying, we're not. It's not even about, we're just disconnected. We're part of nature. We are animals. And once upon a time, we were part of that system, and we are totally separate from it now. And I think a lot of that obviously has got to do with industrialization and working, and people are just so in survival mode that, they don't have the time, they don't have the energy, they do not have the resources or the capacity to actually reconnect with nature, because they are rushing.
I mean, all of which are illusions, Sarah. You know that. We all have the time. We've just been conditioned to think we don't have the time.
But time is also about setting boundaries. And I mean, I guess that's one of the things that I have really learned in my time here. And I mean, I used to work 12-hour days. 12-hour days for me used to be quite normal. I won't do that anymore. And I think a lot of people don't actually realize that you don't have to do overtime. You can say no.
But that would require them saying no to other things that they want in their lives to, I feel a lot of the times, numb their disconnection. Because I think a lot of people are afraid of being on their own and in peace and quiet, because it reminds you of all the things that you're lacking in, and no one wants to be in that. I mean, I love it. I feel like you love it. We can be hermiting for the rest of our lives. It does sometimes feel very unfulfilling, which we'll talk about in a moment, but I do think that it is really a way to numb what people are really experiencing. How else would you hide from that if it wasn't for all the distractions?
Work was a distraction for me, without a doubt. And I mean, now I set boundaries around overtime. I won't do it unless it's an absolute catastrophe, and it absolutely can't wait until tomorrow. Whereas I feel that, and I think our society also has an expectation, and I can't comment on other industries, but I mean, certainly in the corporate environment, there is an expectation. And you'd look around the office at times, and you'd see people sitting in the office at 6 o'clock at night just to be there, because they believed that there was this expectation to actually be there, and work overtime. And things that could be put off until the next day, would be done after hours. And so I've set really clear boundaries with myself around it. And it's confronting, saying to your boss, no, I have plans and I'm not staying back tonight. But I mean, yes, distraction. And I stopped drinking alcohol about 18 months ago, because I was drinking alcohol every night. I mean, I'm not suggesting that I was, drinking bottles of wine, but I was having a glass or two every single night. And I've done that most of my life. And was like, why am I actually doing this? And stopping it, it was really interesting because on something, what am I going to do at night? You know, what am I going to do with my hands? We get into these really interesting patterns. And I do believe it is, you know, about numbing ourselves and distraction.
Yeah, look, I think that people go into these spaces either for, like you had said, for either peace or protection. And until you work out what that is for yourself, you don't really know how to approach the healing aspect or the accepting of the reasonings. And I look, you had said earlier about how your attachment style has probably for the most part been a driver as to the decisions that you've made. I do also think that there is something to be said about being in survival mode because you thought that that's what you had to take on in order to be able to exist, right? I know that's been the case for me. And I, much like yourself, when we were talking about last time, I'm in a place where I'm questioning everything in my life. And when I hear your story of where you're living and how wonderful it is and how serene it sounds and how peaceful it sounds, I think to myself, how can anyone feel unfulfilled? So talk to me about what that is for you, because I think it resonates with a lot of the women who listen to this show.
There's just a longing. There's a longing, and I don't know what that longing is. And part of it, I guess, is to potentially be part of a community where you're not the strange one. Because I often feel like I am the strange one because I live out here on my own. And, you know, I have very few friends who are single, you know, they have husbands, you know, or partners. Some of them have children. I've done the complete opposite to what society teaches us to do. And I don't know what it is, but I do feel like I need more in my life. I need to leave a legacy. I want to create an impact, but I don't know what that looks like. So I love my life here. I absolutely love my life here, but I do feel like I'm at a point in my life where I could be doing more, but I don't know what that more is. And I feel I need it. I feel like I need something that excites me again. That's really what it comes down to. And I don't want that excitement to be, you know, Tinder. I want it to be deeper than that.
Yes. I mean, those things are fleeting anyway, right? God help, I will never go back online, let me tell you. But yes, I get that. I get that. But it also sounds like you have community. How are you the weird one? You're all out there protecting trees 24/7. I would think that for most people, that would sound like a weird thing to do.
Well, this is where it's all turned. So, I mean, so much has happened since I last spoke to you a few weeks ago. And I love this because if you know, there's so much stuff online about manifestation. And I don't know if I'm a manifestation person or not because I've done the mantras. You know, I've got up even earlier. I get up at 4 a.m., but I've done the 3:30 a.m. to write out a page of mantras. And yes, I'm that crazy person. Well, I'm that crazy. But what I've discovered is that when you actually say, well, I think I want community. I think I will not a think, it's a feel. It's not actually about here. It's about here. It's about feeling. And we get so caught up in our heads when we actually need to listen to what's going on in here. And this is where it's been coming from. I haven't been thinking, oh God, you know, I'm 54. I need to do something with my life. It's been a feeling just that I am meant for more I can contribute more, but I didn't know what that looked like. So I was feeling that. I was feeling I want to leave a legacy. I want to create an impact. I want to find community that speaks my language. And in just this really short period of time, I didn't know how. And I was like, where do you go to meet people when you're in your 50s and live in the middle of nowhere? And I think because we are all hermits here, the prospect of actually meeting people in the community just didn't seem like a really viable solution to me from a thinking perspective. And I actually thought about it. But I felt these things, I just let it go. And the next thing I know, I got a message from my 70-year-old friend who lost her husband to sign this petition. Now, I don't go onto Facebook much. I am an Instagram person. And I had no idea about these trees. I'm not going to swear. I was like, oh my God, this is so wrong. And so, I signed the petition, and then I got online, sort of basically saying, if you're local, because everything's been done through a Facebook group, and I couldn't find anything on Instagram. So I thought, right, well, I'm going to be the Instagram voice. So I just put it upon myself. I didn't check with anybody. I just started putting posts out there. And because I was doing that and putting content out there, I have now suddenly got a community who are quite, for lack of a better basically, I'm now part of a group of people who are prepared to chain themselves to trees to stop chainsaws from coming and chopping them down.
This is
and I'm not joking either. I bought chains yesterday.
I love this. This is the stuff in movies.
So I've found a community who think like me, feel like me, and they're just up the road. I've also found a purpose because, obviously saving these trees is really important to these people and to me. But as I say, with the events of Friday, when these contractors turned up to do things that should have been done before this project even started, it makes me think that there's a bigger picture at play here.
Yeah, and I feel like you're going to be talking about this a lot, and so you should be, because there is always a bigger picture. And I feel like they've dumbed us down to a point where we focus so small that we don't actually look at the overarching reason for things anymore. And I love that you talk about that longing, because I really felt that. And I'm like, I really, really get that. And you want to leave a legacy behind, but you don't know what that is. So my question for you is, how do you want to be remembered? What do you want people to be saying about you when you have crossed the rainbow?
It's an interesting question. I haven't really thought about it.
I mean, that's what your legacy is. How you're remembered is your legacy. And so, I always think of, morbid for a lot of people, but I have no problems talking about, that phase of my life, because it's just a phase. It keeps going, if you believe in reincarnation and consciousness. But, what is it that you want? But what do you want people to say while they're standing there with a glass of whatever in their hand and a canapé?
Do you love chickens? Crazy
Her
chicken
eggs
lady?
are good. Her eggs were amazing.
I am a crazy chicken lady. And one of my dreams now is to create the time and the financial space in my life to actually support charities. People have always, when I was a child, I wanted to be a zoologist. I wasn't actually interested in physically looking after animals like a vet or a vet nurse. I wanted to do bigger things, So one of my favorite social media accounts is the Shellrick Trust in Africa, and I grew up in South Africa, and the Shellrick Trust do amazing work for wildlife in Africa. And if you don't follow them and you're into Look, it's horrific. It's graphic, really graphic. But they are, I mean, the stuff that they do is just incredible. So my dream now is to be able to support people who are doing this grassroots stuff financially. But I think it's shifting. And I now want the time to actually do the grassroots stuff myself. And just this week, because this whole tree thing's only literally started Sunday before last, the time required to do this type of work is phenomenal. You know, our chat group is blowing up at 2 a.m. with stuff going, you know, happening and that type of thing. And I think I would just like people to say she really cared. She really cared, and she wasn't scared to help when she could.
That's beautiful. It really doesn't matter how, does it?
So, and just knowing myself, it will be around animals and the natural environment, and animals in particular.
If there was a piece of advice you could give your younger self, knowing all the things that you know now, what would that be?
Been asked this question so many times, and I think I keep on avoiding it. And I know why I'm avoiding it, because the advice that I'd give to my younger self is advice I could actually give myself right now. And it's a biggie. It's a really biggie. I have, and I'm probably going to get emotional about this, so I end up a blubbering mess.
Bring it on. Bring it.
Just ride it out with me. I'll be okay. Ditch the 9 to 5. I've never felt like I fit in there. I was horrible when I was a manager doing those 12-hour days. I was managing a team of young women, you know, receptionists and admin assistants. I was horrible. I had no empathy, and I still struggle with empathy for humans unless I can relate to them in some way. I get more emotional about somebody losing a pet than I do about somebody losing a family member, and I'm going to be honest. So that, I think that would have been my advice to myself, is get out of the 9 to 5, because it squashed my soul. I think part of the reason why I am so passionate about wildlife, you know, well, standing up for causes that I care about, is to be that voice. And that voice was completely squashed in corporate environment, especially as a woman working in a mostly male-dominated industry. So I most of my career I've worked in construction, certainly as when I was younger, and then I moved to ag roles, and obviously in agriculture, again, very male-dominated industry, although that's changing. Well, both are changing. Definitely more women in both sectors now. And the reality is that I'm still in 9 to 5, and that's why I avoid this question, because I'm still there, and actually taking that leap and trusting that my wings will grow that's a big one, because everything that I've built relies on regular income. You know, I have a mortgage, my horses need to be fed, you need to drive your car, and you know, That's why I took another leap and started an online business to work at building a separate income stream that could become a permanent income stream on my own terms, and also give me the freedom. And that's become even more apparent this week, because tomorrow we have a problem with our roster and actually getting people at the trees, because everybody's at work. And I mean, everybody is, is working around existing commitments, mums around kids and school drop-offs, and people around medical appointments, and people around work, and, not being able to be there because they need to go to the office, or they can't work from there. They might be able to do meetings from there remotely, but other stuff can't happen. And if I was my own boss and in a position to work remotely, which obviously working online gives you the freedom and the flexibility to do, I could work up there all day tomorrow. Because the reality is we don't know when TMR are going to come and chop those trees down. And quite frankly, at the moment, we don't trust anything they're telling us. So it's a big one.
I get that.
And thank you for asking it, because it's something that it's confronting for me and something that I'm working towards it. I understand that, but I mean, deep down in my soul, I know that I just want to go, I'm out. I don't want to do this anymore. And I know that there would be thousands of people that resonate, millions of people that resonate with that.
There's going to be a woman, even a man. The male audience is actually growing, but there's going to be a woman sitting there somewhere at her office desk listening to this going, yeah. Yeah. And I think, like you said, and I thank you for bringing that up, because a lot of us have built lives that rely on regular income. It's convenient. It almost feels like we're trapped. And so I wonder sometimes, I sold a house a few months ago. Do I buy another one? Do I stay renting? What do I do? Do I want to lock myself in with another bank? And I don't. I don't. And at the same time, I would love my own acreage. I would love land where I can grow my own food, because having my hands in dirt is where I feel alive. I love weeding, Sarah. Like, I love picking weeds out. People hate that. And I'm just like, it's so peaceful for me. It's so peaceful. It's going to resonate with so many people, what you just said. And thank you for sharing that, because I think that it is hard for a lot of people to admit that that's what they really want.
There's a book that I'm desperate to read, and I haven't actually bought it yet. And he's somebody local up in Queensland, and coach, I can't remember his name now, but the book I think is called Money Does Buy Happiness. And he actually delves in. What I'm fascinated by is he actually delves into society and the trap, and that trap that you're talking about. And when COVID hit and interest rates went through the roof, I mean, my mortgage almost doubled. I literally felt like my world was falling apart. And I get what you're saying, because part of me is so inclined just to sell everything and buy a bus.
No. Yeah.
RV's
the dream. Self-contained RV is the dream.
And there's a whole community. In the times that I have been on Tinder, I do seem to attract these people who have left the rat race and do literally live out of caravans and buses. And there is a whole underground movement that rose up and still during COVID for all of these people who I'll just give you an example. I was chatting, and this, as I say, was through dating, to a gentleman who used to be a pilot. He refused to get vaccinated. He lost his job. And everything, I mean, his whole life, his partner left him because he no longer had an income coming in and couldn't pay for anything. He pretty much decided to cut his losses when she left and follow his dream, which was to travel Australia. So he sold everything, bought a Winnebago, and he now travels Australia, parking his Winnebago on acreage properties, and in return for parking space, which is obviously free, he helps on those properties, weeding, veggie garden, animals, all that type of thing. And he loves it.
I love this man.
He absolutely loves it. But there's whole networks that have literally risen up to provide people in these caravans and Winnebagos, a way to actually access properties where people are happy for them to come and park up indefinitely for a bit of help around the place. So I was fascinated. I was like, really? Wow, that's amazing. So maybe things are turning, maybe things are changing slowly. But I mean, the reality is that we do need money, and we all have so much negative connotation to money. We have so many stories.
Yeah.
And it's not money's fault, because, if we look around us, everything around us costs something. So we have abundance all around us 24/7, yet we blame the lack on money. And and I do it, and I'm trying to rewire my mindset around that. And I honestly do believe that once I do, things will shift very, very dramatically for me.
I can't help but feel like it's more of an energy exchange, and it's the exchange of that energy that we feel the discomfort. It's not actually the money itself. The money itself is actually completely valueless. It's a piece of plastic, let's be honest. I'm convinced there's chips in all of them. But anyway, that's a whole other rabbit hole. But it's the exchange of energy, I think, that scares a lot of people, because a lot of us are just leaking our own essence everywhere, all over the place. And so how do you see value in yourself and in your energy exchange with others, especially for people like you and I, who are very much a wildlife over people type, So I love that you brought that up. I think that's a massive conversation. A whole episode is required for that one. A whole episode. Rewiring the way that we feel and think about money. That'd be huge. I think that would change so many things.
I think so. And I do believe that once we have a good relationship with money and with ourselves, because it's not just about money, and as you've said, I mean, it's, but I mean, the reality is we all need money, and even if you're living in a Winnebago, you need money for fuel and repairs, food. So.
Yeah. You mentioned earlier that you were a horrible person in this corporate role that you had, and realizing that takes a lot. So I would love to know, Sarah, what you actually love about the woman that you are today and what you are most proud of.
Well, I still manage. Well, I currently manage a team of women. They are outsourced, so they are in the Philippines, and I'm very proud of the way that I manage them. It's very inclusive, whereas I used to be a bit of a dictator. I ask for their insight, their input, and we work as a team as opposed to me being their boss. And I guess because of the culture, one of them does still call me boss, and I'm like, don't call me that. We are a team. So I'm proud of that. I'm proud that when I really feel strongly about something, that I do go for it, even if it takes me a little while to do it. I, and, I'm proud, I left South Africa on my own as a 20-year-old and moved to London. I'm proud that I married a man that I'd known for 18 months, and moved to Australia. Um, I'm I'm proud of the fact that I moved out here. And thinking about this question, I used to think that my sensitivity was my biggest weakness. I cry when I see, animals dead on the side of the road. And I say that, I'll always take animals over people. When I see stories that really, just all the awful photographs coming out of, Gaza of, children and things like that. I mean, I've broken down in tears when I've seen some of that footage, even though it's humans. And I used to think that my sensitivity was a weakness. I'm actually now very proud of that sensitivity. And I don't mind crying. I cry quite regularly. Whereas before I wouldn't allow myself to cry. And it's still a work in progress. I used to get very, very angry. And that used to be my default. Now it's switching. And I guess I'm proud of letting myself or allowing myself to go into those places that maybe a lot of people don't. And looking at them as much as I can from a point of compassion rather than of getting angry with myself. So, yeah, allowing myself to be me. It's taken a long time.
Thank God you're getting there, because that's
I
who this
know.
world needs. It's so what this world needs. I learned that I say a little too late, but I learned it exactly at the right time, that who I am at my core is what this world needs, not the version of myself that I kept putting out there that felt really inauthentic, I guess, to a lot of people, which, in my 20s, I felt like I struggled to make friends because of it. And I was like, why do people not like me? I'm like, well, of course they didn't. They probably caught on to the fact that you're being super inauthentic just to fit in. And now I'm like, I don't care about fitting in. So I've become a magnet for people like that. And so I'm so glad that we've connected, because, Sarah, I knew this conversation would not disappoint me in any kind of way. Like, it would just be fabulous for everybody listening. And I'm sure it's going to land in a sacred place for my audience. So please do tell the listeners where they can find and follow you.
Well, I'm mostly on Instagram. My handle is her_conscious_ways, so her conscious ways. I'm blowing up the social media or blowing up Instagram with tree stories at the moment. But yeah, I share my life. I share my chickens. I have been very quiet on the chicken front because I lost my beautiful little Rosie chicken in September, and she was a very, very special little hen. I share stuff around my horses. There's a lot of wildlife spam. And I do talk about my online business and what I'm learning in that space as well. But as I say, at the moment, it's all about the trees. So, and
it's all about the trees.
It's all about the trees.
I want to know what's going to happen with these trees.
And
I am now going to follow. Send me that petition.
Yes, I will.
I am following this story.
I was about to say, if you want me to send you the link to the petition, then I'm
absolutely. I'll include it.
DM. And listeners as well, if this is something that really hits home for you, send me a DM, and I will gladly share the petition. And also, we spoke about money earlier on. We have got lawyers involved, so we're actually funding the legal fees ourselves through a GoFundMe account. So if you can donate even just a few dollars, that would be really, really helpful. Because I think this is going to get messy.
No, yeah, sounds like it. You're dealing with corporations, Sarah.
Oh, we're dealing with government.
Yeah. Yeah, so corporations.
Oh, yeah.
I'm
Oh,
getting into trouble for that one. Oh, well.
Yeah, should we not talk about that right now? Oh my God, I can't believe. The more this conversation goes on, the more I'm like, oh, okay, yes, we are definitely on the same wavelength.
Yeah, we might have to take this one offline.
I think so.
Yeah. If you are interested in connecting with Sarah, I will include in the episode description and across socials links and ways you can do that. So if you haven't already, head on over to Spotify, YouTube, Instagram, Apple Podcasts, and follow the Skin I'm In podcast to be the first to know when new episodes drop. Sarah, thank you so much for being a guest on the Skin I'm In podcast.
Thank you.
What I love most about Sarah's story is that it reminds us that the soul is always leading us home, not to comfort, but to truth. Sometimes that journey asks us to burn everything down, the marriage, the identity, the expectations, so that we can remember who we were before the world told us who to be. Her courage to face her own trauma, to choose peace, and to stand for something bigger than herself, even if it's just two old trees, is a call to all of us. A reminder that purpose isn't always a grand mission. Sometimes it's simply listening when your heart says, no, not this, not anymore. Sarah's journey is also a reminder that peace doesn't come from escaping life, it comes from meeting it with open eyes and an open heart. Whether it's healing old wounds, protecting what's sacred, or simply finding something to look forward to again. This is the work our soul came here to do. One choice, one breath, one brave act at a time. With gratitude and grace, have a wonderful day.